What's up YouTube? Mike the Manic Geek here. I want to go ahead and apologize for the sound with this video up front. My recording setup right now is a little on the weird side, and I unfortunately don't have a secondary recording source, so I'm having to do everything off of my phone for right now. So apologies. Eventually I'm going to have everything set up the way I had it before at the very least. But some of you out there might be wondering why exactly I'm wearing the getup that I'm wearing right now. Good question. Today we're going to be taking a look at the Rosewill Cullinan, which is an ATX full tower that has tempered glass side panels on the left and right side of the case, as well as the front of the case. We're going to take a deeper look at this and go over some of the features, the build quality, and then show you guys what the finished product turned out like in this case. So we're going to start with the obvious bits in the outside here. Now, externally, it's very plain. You've just got flat panels going on the left and right hand side here, both of which are, of course, tempered glass. It's 5mm thick in this particular implementation, so you're going to want to make sure that you're a little careful with the glass, but it's not super delicate to the point that it's just going to shatter the second you set it on a hard surface. It does mount to the side of the case with pegs that stick out of the frame of the case, and there are rubber grommets in the glass that help hold on to these pegs. It feels like it's going to be a little unsturdy at first, but after you get used to putting the glass back onto the case, it gets really easy from there, so I wouldn't really worry about that too much. Now the glass here is smoked, so you're not going to be able to really cleanly see the interior of this case unless you have some kind of lighting going on. Thankfully, Rosewill saw fit to outfit this case with 4 LED fans of 120mm variants, and in this particular implementation, they light up white. And it is the cleanest looking white LED I think I've ever seen on an LED fan in my life. And it's vibrant to the point that it will actually illuminate the case, as I'll show you guys later, in the dark with the panels on, and give you a really clean look to the inside. It also helps that these fans happen to flow a pretty decent amount of air. Probably the only complaint that I have about them comes into effect later on when I start talking about one of the other features that this case comes with. Now, as far as dust filtering is concerned, you have 2 magnetic dust filters for this case, one for the front and one for the top. The quality of the filter itself is pretty decent, except around the outside. It looks like the process for stamping these out leaves the filter itself with some kind of jagged edges on there, and depending on how you run your hand across it, there's a slight chance that it might nick you, but I haven't had that happen to me yet, and I've been using this case for close to a month now, so just something to keep in mind. Now, focusing more on the front of the case, some of you out there would probably be forgiven for thinking that this was something like a tempered glass fractal design kind of knockoff case, right? But that's definitely not what's going on here. Yes, it is true that the side of the front panel here has those kind of defined looking slats in the side to let air breathe in through the front of the case. But externally, that's really where most all of the similarities between something like this and a fractal design case end. So I just wanted to sort of clear the air with that one. But removing the front panel does show us that the tempered glass that's in the front is being held into the front panel with an adhesive. And the Rosewill logo that appears on the bottom of the glass up front, that logo is attached basically as a vinyl adherent to the glass. So it would actually be really cool to use that as a template to bring it to a glass etcher and get that actually etched into the face of the glass if you wanted to mod the case a little bit further and have a more tasteful logo going on up front. Now, a nice thing about the front panel is once it's removed, the front I/O stays on the case. Speaking of front I/O, you're actually given a pretty decent complement of I/O up here with 2 USB 2 ports and 2 USB 3.0 ports. You're also given your obligatory headphone and microphone jacks, nice tactile and clicky power and reset switches, and a 3-stage knob for a fan speed controller. I feel like they may have sort of missed an opportunity here with the lighting on the buttons, because the power button lights up blue and the reset button lights up red, but the fans light up white. Now I also understand that there are red and blue LED fan variants of this case, but I kind of feel like it just would have been that one step extra to color coordinate the lights for the switches on these cases to give it a really cohesive outer look. Now moving back to that front panel area, you can actually set your fans in between the frame of the case and the front panel of the case so that you could actually fit a thicker radiator on the inside if you really wanted to. But what will happen then is you'll lose out on the dust filter in the front of the case. So if you go that route, do so at your own risk and know that you will need to take this panel off a lot to keep the inside of this case clean. I will say, however, that if you can keep the dust filtration implemented in this case, I've actually noticed that over the course of the several weeks that I've been using this, it's been kept relatively clean inside. I'm really pleased with the way the filtration is working on this case. Now to touch quickly on the bottom of the case, you do have 4 really nice matte black case feet down at the bottom that do have a rubber surface underneath them that keeps them from sliding around, and it does a really good job of not leaving any streak marks on the surface that it's sitting on top of. Also keeps the case elevated pretty decently high off the ground. Not that it's an excuse to keep the case on the floor, and you will still have room for your power supply to breathe even through the dust filter that's provided underneath the case. Now let's start talking about the inside of the case real quick, because just to sort of set my forearm up against this for a size reference, this case has a lot of vertical room and even a lot of depth going on the inside here. And when you take the glass panel off, you're greeted with a really open interior that's capable of holding even up to EATX motherboards and even the wide dual socket server motherboards inside this case if you wanted to. Now you'll also see across the bottom that we have a really clean power supply shroud here. There's no gaudy branding or logos on it or anything like that. Now we do of course have a plastic shroud next to the motherboard that will help cover your cables up a little bit more and keep them more cleanly routed. You will of course need to remove this if you're using one of those super wide dual socket server boards, but that's not really that huge a deal because you still have space near the front of the case where you can still route your 24-pin cables up and still have them cleanly routed. Now before we move on to the back of the case, I do really want to quickly touch on radiator placement for this. So, biggest radiators you can hold up front are either a 280mm or a 360mm officially. You can also hold the same size radiators in the roof of the case, and at the rear you can hold either a 120 or a 140 radiator as well. Bear in mind that depending on the size of the radiators that you pick, you may be a little bit restricted on what you can pair either a top or front radiator with. So just keep in mind where you're going to set your end tanks for your water cooling for this and how you want to route the loop before you decide on your radiator sizes. But I will say that you're given plenty of radiator surface area to build a really kick-ass SLI rig or crossfire rig inside this case. So real quick, let's move into the back of the case and then we'll start talking about what it was like to build inside of the Rosewill Cullinan. So moving into the rear of the case where cable management takes place, you are given enough room for a pretty decent length power supply down here where the basement is, and plenty of room to tuck away some of the excess cables to make routing cleaner and easier out back. Because since you have a tempered glass panel back here as well, we're still going to have a pretty strong likelihood of seeing your cable management here. Unless of course you're angling the case back towards a wall like I am. In which case... But still, take pride in your cable management. Now also at the rear of the case, we're greeted with 3 solid-state drive caddies which are removable via thumb screws, and we also have room for a couple of platter drives near the front edge of the power supply shroud. I also wanted to touch real quickly on the parts that you get to build with in this case. You get your obligatory box-o, baggy-o stuff, but then on top of that, you get like 9 cable ties with this case. That's a really tiny thing to get excited about, I know, but the fact that you get so many cable ties with this case for building in, There are no words. So what I decided to do when building with this case was actually use just the cable ties that came with this case, or at least the same number, to see if I could achieve a clean end result. Ultimately, yes, I was able to do so. The cable management in the back of this case actually made it pretty easy for me to just use the included cables. For what I would personally consider a quick and dirty cable management job on my part, I could probably get this a little bit cleaner. Also, one thing that I want to point out, try to avoid routing your 24-pin cable along the shallow section on the back of the motherboard, because what I was finding was happening, even with the braided cable extension being the only thing that was really there along the back of the motherboard tray, it still created enough of a bulge that it became difficult to put the side panel back on after cable management. So that could pose a problem for some system builders if you're trying to build with a case, or a power supply rather, that doesn't have a long enough ATX 24-pin cable. So just keep that in mind when you go to build with this case. If you have a ribbon style cable for your power supply cables, that'll help tremendously because they'll be able to actually rest flat enough and won't have necessarily all of that cable braiding making the cables thicker. I want to talk about the fan speed controller that's present on this, because this is another feature where they sort of amped up what was given to us in previous variants of this particular case design, like the AI Crystal from Anides. So what they've done here is they've given you more fans to plug into the same controller. You can actually run up to 7 3-pin fans off of the included fan speed controller and run them at 3 different settings: full speed, voltage reduction, and off, or high, low, and off. The only thing that sucks about this particular implementation is not the fault of the fan speed controller, but more the fault of the fans. Unfortunately, the LEDs for these fans have to run at 12 volts of power in order to have all of the power that they need to actually turn on. So anything less than 12 volts, unfortunately, you don't get the LEDs for these fans. And transitioning into the completed build for this computer, that's a damn shame, because when the fans are running at low speed, they are extremely quiet. So quiet that the loudest thing in this rig is my graphics card and my power supply fan when that kicks on. But when those lights are on, man, does this rig shine. Especially when you have a more muted color palette going on with the white LED fans here. Everything just takes on a whole new level of class with your build. And especially given the intelligent layout of the interior, it's big and it's spacious, but it doesn't give your hardware that sort of dwarfism that happens with a really big tower that has a lot of room for hardware in it. You don't get that here, and I'm really glad to see that that aspect of this case wasn't really modified here by Rosewill. In fact, that's pretty much the general takeaway from this case for me. Granted, this is my very first tempered glass building experience, so take some of my impressions here with a bit of a grain of salt. I would love to work with some more tempered glass cases, and if you guys have some suggestions for me for some cases that maybe haven't been covered extensively by other channels, let me know and I'll see if I can get some into the channel to take a look at. But by and large, this case, especially for its current price point, just makes a lot of sense for a classy, high-end, enthusiast building experience. Everything just sort of fell into place here, and because airflow is so strong in this case, my gaming temperatures with my overclocked FX 8350 and my GTX 980 for the win, my temperatures are actually staying really consistently cool, which is nice to see in a case like this. I mean, realistically, you should expect it, right? I mean, there's nothing obstructing airflow anywhere. If your temperatures are bad, something is really horribly wrong there. So yeah, for the current price of $130 US at the time of filming, given the feature set that this has, given the interior layout, cable management, even though it could use a little bit of extra work, the brilliant LEDs on these fans, I mean, I can't say enough about those, to be perfectly honest with you. Guys, the Rosewill Cullinan is definitely the total package, and this was an absolute joy to build in. Matter of fact, this is actually going to become something of a project for the channel moving forward because I really want to populate this case with some water cooling gear at some point. But I want to hear feedback from you guys down in the comments below. Let me know what kind of hardware you would like to see me go for. Hit me up, let me know. But guys, that does it for my look of the Rosewill Cullinan. All said and done, any of the cons that exist with this case are definitely outweighed by the pros. Build quality is excellent. The tempered glass is extremely pleasant to look at, and it's not overly smoked. The lighting on the fans is brilliant and vibrant and accurate. Airflow is great throughout the case. Water cooling support is awesome. I really can't ask for more with it. It definitely gets a thumbs up from me, and it's definitely a case that you guys should consider for your next enthusiast water cooling build. Anyway, guys, I'm gonna head out of here for now, so go ahead and hit me up with a thumbs up or a thumbs down like you do, how you do. If you haven't done so already, get subscribed. There's gonna be a lot more content coming to the channel soon, and as always, I will catch you guys next time. So take it easy, YouTube.